Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Kyle Henderson along with Andrew Bone. Today, we're talking Alabama Crimson Tide football recruiting going into a busy week. You got Alabama starting spring football practice on Friday. You also have Alabama's men's basketball team playing in the NCAA basketball tournament on Saturday. So a lot to go over, but of course, recruiting don't stop on BamaInsider.com. Here with Andrew Bone. Bone, how is your bracket looking, man, for March Madness?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't even filled one out. I hadn't even looked at it. I usually have it filled out by the end of Sunday night. And last year, obviously, there wasn't one. But the year before, I remember, I think I filled it out like 10 minutes before the first game tipped off. So I'm gonna have to get on it pretty quickly because I got a few different brackets that I'm doing this year. Obviously, the one on Bama Insider. So hey, all of our fans who are watching, sign up for the Bama Insider bracket. I think that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, it should be fun. So, okay, so we're talking recruiting. Alabama just inked Emmanuel Henderson. They didn't ink him, but he got a commitment from an in-state prospect. Now Alabama has two in-state commitments. Kind of want to just get the pulse on, now that the dust had settled a little bit more on your take on Henderson and kind of just this class, how it's building out so far. I know it's early in the process, ranked number 14 in the team rankings, a lot better than last year. But 5 commitments now, starting to get a little bit of momentum. Your thoughts on Henderson and just kind of how this class is developing so far?
It's a great start to this recruiting class. Alabama's been pretty patient. They haven't racked up a bunch of commitments just yet. 5 commitments. Pretty strong start, but I don't see them trying to land 10, 15 commitments before we get to the month of June, because it's starting to look like we're going to have some some camps this summer, so kids are going to be able to get evaluated a little bit more. So it gives Alabama a little bit of opportunity to be patient and really kind of determine who they really want to go after. But Emmanuel Henderson jumping on board last week, obviously this past week, it's huge. 6'1", he's listed at 185 pounds, a little outdated. I think he's about 6'1", 195 pounds now. And from talking to his head coach, Jim Bob Strickland, the other day, it certainly seems like Henderson's recruited more as an athlete than a running back by Alabama. So I certainly believe that Alabama still going after several running backs. There's a lot of guys that are out there they're still going after. So even though Henderson's rated as a running back, I'd list him more as an athlete. Can really kind of play all over. Can line up in the slot. He could also potentially play defensive back. I know he loves playing running back. He's an offensive guy, but I wouldn't label him just as a running back. I think he's more of an athlete, and I think Alabama's, still trying to go after at least a couple running backs. Would not be surprised if we saw, potentially 2 more running backs in this recruiting class. So I think that's going to be something to watch moving forward. But Emmanuel Henderson, certainly an elite talent. Somebody that Alabama has recruited for a very long time, and I'm sure when he announced that decision, he was wearing I think he was wearing an orange and blue tie, and certainly probably scared a lot of people when he announced that decision. But we were pretty confident that he was going to be choosing Alabama. I think he's very confident in his decision. I think like I said before, I think Alabama has talked to him more about playing some different roles on their team and not just labeling him as a running back. I think they really want to spread him out and get the ball in his hands, or potentially moving over to the defense side of the ball. So we'll see what they end up doing with him. But amazing athlete and somebody that Alabama really wanted as part of this recruiting class. You got excuse me. Give a lot of credit to Charles Kelly, his area recruiter. I thought he did a great job developing that relationship with Emmanuel throughout the entire process, and that's a relationship that's gone on for about a year now. So a lot of props to Coach Kelly for reeling him in, and let's see what happens moving forward.
Here with Andrew Bone talking Alabama Crimson Tide football recruiting. Definitely hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. We appreciate you more than you know. Definitely check out our videos regarding Alabama's football team as they gear up for spring football. Practice will start on Friday, March 19th. We got a bunch of storyline series coming out. Great work by Tony Tuscaloosa on Bama Insider, as well as a ton of videos that you can scroll through right here on our YouTube channel. So definitely hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Bone, look, I know you just said he's listed as a running back, but he's listed, he's more like an athlete. And it's pretty amazing that Alabama is going to continue to go after more running backs, because if you look at the running back group at Alabama, it's completely stacked, from head to toe, with Branson Robinson returning for his extra senior season. And then you also have Kamar Wheaton, you have, Killen Robinson, Trey Sanders, Jace McClellan, Kyle Edwards, Roydell Williams. I mean, there's a ton of guys. So who are some other running back targets that could potentially join this room of greatness?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys that they're going after, a lot of guys that they're recruiting, but there's also still a lot of guys that they want to see, a lot of guys that they want to evaluate. You go back to Josh Jacobs not getting a committable offer from Alabama until the day before National Signing Day. Mark Ingram didn't start getting recruited by Alabama until about the final month before signing day. So some of these guys that we may see as Alabama targets may not even emerge until later on in the year. But some of the top guys that are out there kind of early for Alabama, Gavin Sawchuk out of Colorado. George Pettaway out of Virginia. Those are two. I would consider them sort of like Keelan Robinson type athletes. They're a little bit smaller, but they're home run hitters. I mean, these are guys that can take it the distance from anywhere on the field. They're quick, they're fast, and they can make big plays. So, these are guys who are also planning on visiting Tuscaloosa in June. As long as things go according to plan and the NCAA lifts that recruiting dead period, but these guys are going to visit Tuscaloosa as quickly as possible. So, I would certainly watch them. Jamarion Miller from Texas, another two backs from Texas that Alabama really likes. Jamarion Miller, Tavares Jones. They also like Jaydon Blue, who already committed to Texas. So you never know. Jaydon Blue may end up, taking a trip to Tuscaloosa eventually. But certainly watching Jamarion Miller and Tavares Jones out of Texas. Branson Robinson, who's currently the number one running back in the country, out of Mississippi. I don't think Alabama likes him. I think they would like to see him probably a little bit more. Maybe try to see him a little bit this spring. But there's a lot of running backs that are out there that I think Alabama has a tremendous amount of interest in. I mean, look at the top four. I mean, we just mentioned all four of those guys, and there's several others kind of throughout the country that those are kind of the guys that Alabama likes a lot right now. They're certainly Katron Allen. He's another guy out of IMG Academy. I just think that Alabama is certainly pressing for these guys right now, but there's still some others that they still want to watch a little bit more, maybe see these guys in person. And, as we talked about earlier, as long as the NCAA lists this recruiting dead period, they're going to be able to see these guys in person this summer.
Here with Andrew Bone at BamaInsider.com. Definitely hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. We appreciate you more than you know, talking recruiting as we always do on Tuesday evening. I know you want to talk about Evan Stewart and his decommitment from Texas. If you can kind of tell us a little bit about Evan Stewart and what that might mean for Alabama, and maybe touch on a couple other wide receiver targets while you're at it.
Yeah, Evan Stewart, one of the top wide receivers in the country in the Rivals 100. I think he's surprised a lot of people when he made a commitment to Texas last month. He kind of said that he was going to wait it out a little while, kind of enjoy the process a little bit, and then bam, commits to Texas. For Texas people, probably not that big of a surprise. It's new coaching staff with Coach Sark and Coach Banks and those guys, heavily pursuing him and wanting to make a big splash in the Lone Star State this year. So they got a big commitment early from him, but he decided to back off and kind of reevaluate things. And he ends up saying that he feels like the SEC is the best conference in college football, which not really that big of a surprise, but I think with him being committed to Texas at one point, that should certainly sound the alarms that he may not end up in the Big 12. That he's certainly looking strongly at the SEC, and I know Alabama, Florida, Georgia, LSU, Texas A&M, all strongly in the mix for him. And I know Alabama's certainly making a big push for him. They like him a lot. He has a really good relationship with the Alabama coaching staff, and I certainly think that Alabama's got a great chance with him. I mean, you look at, if you're a wide receiver, in high school football right now, and you're not seriously considering Alabama, it's kind of a surprise. As long as Alabama wants you. I mean, you look at Alabama and the amount of talent that they've developed at the wide receiver position, and we can talk about Coach Sark's not there anymore. Well, all these elite receivers have had different coordinators, different wide receiver coaches when they were, at Alabama. Julio Jones had a different OC. Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy, and those guys. Henry Ruggs. I mean, Alabama has, just so many people that work behind the scenes who help develop these guys, from the nutritionists, strength and conditioning staff. We just saw Alabama, have a Heisman Trophy winner at the wide receiver position. So this is certainly a position that Alabama can recruit easily, but they also are trying to go after the best guys. And I think Evan Stewart's certainly one of the top tier wide receivers in the country. Alabama showing a ton of interest, and when Alabama really turns up the heat, especially on a wide receiver target these days, these guys tend to take that pretty seriously. So I think Alabama is certainly going to be a very strong contender for Evan Stewart moving forward, and would not be surprised if we saw him on Alabama's commitment list at some point. But make no mistake, it's going to be a tough recruitment. There's a lot of schools that are in the race, a lot of schools that he likes, but like I said, if he makes a trip to Tuscaloosa this summer, I think they're going to have a good chance to really land his commitment.
Let's talk about some other wide receivers within this class of 2022. I'll just kind of pop on Rivals, top target list, and maybe if there's a couple that might stand out, you can jump in and kind of talk about some of these guys. But why don't you kind of mention some other key targets, and I'll pull those guys up for you.
It's probably not going to be a monster wide receiver class right now. I see, 3, maybe 4 receivers. 4 might be pushing it, but they're at least going to go after 3 guys. At least try to sign 3 guys. Look at Kevin Coleman right now, sitting at number 2, 5-star wide receiver. Who, it seems like Alabama's in the driver's seat for it this time, but also, he's going to wait it out. He wants to enjoy the process. He wants to take visits. He's already saying that he's going to wait until, probably one of the All-American games to announce that decision. There's an in-state wide receiver, Amari Kelly, from Hewitt-Trussville, who certainly has Alabama very high on his list. We mentioned Evan Stewart, Koji Antwi. They're at number 10 out of Sewanee, Georgia, has Alabama in his top 5, but I think it's probably more of a Georgia, Texas A&M recruiting battle for Kojo right now. Another wide receiver that I think Alabama has an excellent chance to land is Barian Brown out of Tennessee. I know that there's been some talk of Isaiah Horton, another wide receiver from Tennessee, as a potential target joining Alabama's class, but I'm looking more at Barian Brown. So really, if I'm an Alabama fan, I'm watching these wide receivers, kind of throughout the country right now, as to who may have the best chance to end up in the Tides class. I'm really watching Evan Stewart. I'm watching Amari Kelly. I'm watching Kevin Coleman and Barian Brown. Those are probably the 4 that I feel Alabama has the best chance with at this time out of any of these guys. But, certainly a lot of guys that are out there. Could easily see some guys pick up some offers throughout the spring and the summer. And, hopefully, a lot of these guys, even the ones that, are considered key targets, will at least come in, work out, and attend camp for Alabama, because even though they may be top targets now, they still haven't been seen in person. They haven't been, properly evaluated. Yeah, they've been, evaluated based on their film, based on, maybe some workout videos and highlights and stuff like that. But Nick Saban, that coaching staff, they still want to see these guys in person. They still want to see them work out. I'll never forget, an assistant coach who's no longer at Alabama. I remember a couple years ago, him telling me they weren't really sure if they were going to make this big strong push for Jalen Waddle. They liked him. They just weren't, they liked him on film, but they really wanted to see him in person. Alabama went out to see him during the spring. Really liked him a lot. I mean, he continued to kind of jump up and move up their recruiting board. And then he ends up coming to camp. Well, they said he was the best, inside receiver that they had in camp in years. And which it was kind of surprising at the time, just because of all the receivers that had played in Tuscaloosa and the guys that they had had in camp for years. I was just like, okay. They're probably just trying to they're probably hoping he gets a high ranking. But obviously he turned into being just an unbelievable and one of the most explosive players that we've ever seen in college football. So I think that, there's a chance for some of these guys to really move up this recruiting board throughout the spring, throughout the summer, even guys that, as of right now may not be considered, tier 1 targets. And we may see some tier 1 targets drop down below, especially if they work out at camp this summer. So there's a lot that can happen and a lot can change. Just because you're a number 1 guy right now doesn't mean you're going to be a number 1 guy when you get ready to make that decision.
All right, Bone, let's talk about some other guys, possibly on Flip Watch, that Alabama is recruiting guys who are committed elsewhere. It always happens. Happened a couple times on signing day for Alabama recently. Who is Alabama still pursuing guys that are committed elsewhere?
Oh, absolutely. You look at last year's recruiting class. I think there were 7 players in that class who flipped from their school to Alabama. So it's going to happen. You don't know who it's going to be, but it typically happens. I mean, you look at last year's class. We weren't talking about JoJo Earl prior to his flip from LSU to Alabama. We weren't talking about Devontae Smith. A week before his flip to Alabama. We weren't talking about Kadarius Callaway before his flip from Mississippi State to Alabama. So there's easily could be some of those guys who are out there that we're not talking about right now who could end up potentially flipping down the road that Alabama's pressing hard for behind the scenes. There's also guys who are out there that Alabama, still wants to wait and see in camp this summer. You look back a few years ago, Quentin Williams. Quentin Williams was committed to Auburn. Obviously, one of the top defensive linemen. Turned into be one of the top defensive linemen in the country. But he wasn't heavily pursued by Alabama early in the process. He ends up committing to Auburn. Alabama waited, had him come to camp, and he ends up doing really well, obviously. And Alabama started pushing for him, and he ends up flipping from Auburn to Alabama. Same with Mac Jones. Mac Jones was committed to Kentucky. Alabama wanted to see him in camp. They had already taken a commitment from Tua, and he came to camp and obviously performed really well. And they just said, we're going to take a second quarterback, and Mac Jones ends up flipping. So that worked out pretty well for Alabama again. But you look at some of the guys in this year's recruiting class who've already made commitments. I'm looking at Bear Alexander, 5-star defensive tackle, who's committed to Georgia. I'm kind of looking in the state of Texas right now. Jaydon Blue, running back from Texas, who's committed to Texas at this point. You got to also have Bobby Taylor, 4-star cornerback from Katy, Texas, who's already planning a trip to Tuscaloosa in June. So those are a few guys from the state of Texas. Now, Bear Alexander, he says he's pretty solid with his commitment to Georgia. I know he had an offer from Alabama prior to his commitment, so we'll see if he ends up taking any visits. But I'm not really expecting, anything from him at the moment. Jaydon Blue, Alabama had very high interest in him prior to his commitment to the Longhorns, so we'll see if he potentially still takes some visits, but not really. Don't really expect anything at this point. One of the top overall players in the country, Travis Hunter from Georgia, is committed to Florida State. One of Alabama, would be right at or near at the top of Alabama's wish list. He's very firm with Florida State, but Alabama, Georgia, a few other schools continuing to heavily pursue him. A lot of schools really want him as a part of their recruiting class. So we'll see if he potentially ends up taking some visits. But as of right now, still very firm with the Seminoles. But there's some other guys that are out there that Alabama's showing interest in and hoping to at least get on campus this summer for visits. So Once again, I will be absolutely shocked if we don't see someone flip to Alabama. We saw several of those happen last year. We see them happen every single year. Of course, Alabama ends up, losing some as well. And of course, we already saw Jeremiah Alexander decommit from Alabama, but obviously Alabama's still trying to get him back on board. And there's some other guys that are out there who've already decommitted from other programs. Holden Stays, who's a 4-star tight end from Georgia, who decommitted from Penn State. Shone Washington, 4-star defensive lineman from Louisiana, who decommitted from LSU. So those are some guys who have already committed, decommitted, and looking strongly at Alabama.
All right, Bone, as we wrap up real quick, and thank you very much for watching the show, everyone. Definitely hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Bone, there's a possibility that guys could somehow come, back this summer. And I'm talking about high school guys coming back, for an opportunity to get evaluated by the coaching staff. How big would this be? Kind of what's the latest on that? I know there's no official word, but, Alabama, it's pretty incredible that they did so well recruiting wise without even seeing anybody in person and put together this #1 class. What's the latest on that? And kind of wrap up the show talking about the potential of high school guys getting an opportunity to get back on campus.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly heading in that direction. Hopefully everything's a go this summer because, it's going to mean a lot for the Alabama coaching staff and for the players. There's a lot of players that are out there who are itching to get an Alabama offer, like a Quentin Williams, like a Mac Jones. They had to come to camp to earn their offer, and they did. We'll see what happened. I mean, imagine if those guys never attended Alabama's camp. If they didn't have that opportunity, would Alabama have, offered those guys? Maybe not. So I think this is going to be huge for Alabama. Get kids back on campus, evaluate them. I don't know if we'll see 1,000 kids on campus for summer camp, but as long as they can get, some guys on campus, 100 or so guys on campus and work them out and evaluate them, it's going to certainly be a big plus because there's a lot of guys out there that are top tier targets right now for Alabama, but they're top tier targets based on highlight films, on game films, on maybe some workout videos. These guys could end up moving down to second tier guys, and we may see second tier guys move up to first tier after they end up working out for Alabama. Alabama finally has an accurate height and weight on these players. They're finally able to work out with them and see what they're able to do out on the field, working with Coach Saban or working with, Bill O'Brien. I think that's, really the big, issue right now in terms of Alabama, not really trying to rack up on a bunch of commitments. You currently see the commitment class with 5 guys who are committed, and it's not like they're pressing for guys to jump on board. They still want to evaluate. They want to make sure they're making the right decisions. This is probably going to be a smaller class, so you got to make sure you're making the right decisions, for your future and for these kids' future. So hopefully things are going to get back to normal, and camps are going to happen, and evaluations are going to take place.
Good stuff, Bone. Well, thank you very much for watching, everyone. Definitely hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. We appreciate you more than you know. Moved past 50,000 subscribers. Now we're marching towards 100,000 subscribers right here on BamaInsider.com. Stay tuned for more coverage as we continue to march towards the end of this week. Alabama starts practice on March 19th. That's Friday. And Alabama basketball plays Iona on Saturday. We'll have you covered right here at BamaInsider.com.